Go. All right, call to order our workshop Tuesday, November 18th, 5 o'clock. Declaration of quorum, 7 present. Welcome, everybody. Thank y'all for being here. Item C, hearing of citizens. We have none for this workshop. Item D1, review November 4th, 2025 election results, related timelines. Mr. Dunson.
Yes, sir. On November 4th, 2025, general election was held by College Station ISD for the purpose of electing Place 3, Place 4, and Place 5 for College Station Independent School District Board of Trustees. The election results were canvassed on November 12th, 2025 as follows. For School Board of Trustees, Place 3, Chris Field, 6,826 votes. Grant Madsen, 1,689 votes. Chris Field was elected to the Board of Trustees, Place 3, with 80.16% of the votes. For Board of Trustees, Place 4, Mike Martindale, 4,969 votes. Jeff Horak, 3,704 votes. Mike Martindale was elected to the Board of Trustees, Place 4, with 57.29% of the votes. For School Board Place 5, Kimberly McAdams, 5,870 votes. Oliver Hadnot, 2,828 votes. Kimberly McAdams was elected to the Board of Trustees, Place 5, with 67.49% of the votes. This evening, we will administer the oath of office to the elected trustees and recognize our outgoing board members, and that meeting is at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Item 2, consider approval of the construction project delivery method for the construction of the CSISD central office. Mr. Buckner.
Okay, so as part of the 2023 bond that was approved by the voters was a central office building. Originally, it kind of started off as finding an existing building and renovating it for the central office. Due to the lack of buildings of that size, we had 2 buildings that came into that were possibilities. One of those was kind of eliminated pretty quick. It was almost going to be like pretty much a full scrape and rebuild. Then the second one has its struggles. It was a tilt wall construction, so it gave lots of obstacles. One of those is it had lots of volume, but not necessarily great square footage. It needed a lot of renovations, and then with it being tilt wall, there was very small chances of adding onto it for any type of future growth, and that site had floodplains all around it. So one of the determining factors was we kind of pivoted to use land that we already currently owned and build a new central office that would meet the needs of the district that we have now and also allow for future growth of whatever that may be. And as you can see on the slide, it is the area off of Sebesta Road. It's kind of behind the car dealerships right there on Highway 6. But it's kind of like a very rough site plan of where we could locate this building and also allow for future growth out there. But according to board policy local for construction methods and procurement, it allows for competitive sale proposal and job order contracting. For this project, it's 2 parts. One is the construction of this, and also is the renovation to the front portion of this existing administration building to relocate some departments within the district over here. But that is to go construction manager at risk, Seymour. That gives us the best option, especially with budgets and the unknown of what's going on in the world, especially now with tariffs going on across and everything else. As we design this project, we can go back with our construction manager, who would serve as a general contractor, and what they would do is constantly give us updated budgets to know where we are on that process and if we need to start making cuts ahead of time, so that we get this within budget and make this a successful project. But so we're asking for that to go to construction manager at risk for the building of the new central office.
Can you share a little bit more about, well, remind me how much was in the budget for this and then also like the timeline that this would,
So for this
The-
project, we have a estimated construction budget of 25.4 million. Our tentative timeline right now is if we are to get this approved tonight to go construction manager at risk, we would try to release this on Thursday to get a construction manager on board. That would come back in the January board meeting for approval of the construction manager. And we would hope to break ground on this in late summer of '26, into July, beginning of August, right as the bulk of our other projects are coming to an end right at that same time. So as we're finishing up those, we would just dive straight into this one and keep going with projects. And this one would have about a total with this one and the renovation here, about an 18-month construction process.
It's my understanding this is more than just a central office. Like there's going to be a lot of meeting spaces in here, a lot of large spaces that even like teams could hold their banquets in and schools could be using for functions. Is that correct?
Yes. It would have a lot of conference spaces with dedicated conference rooms. It would have a dedicated boardroom. Of course, that boardroom would be multi-use to where it wouldn't just be board only. It would have other uses that we could utilize in there. But it would have a big open area for collaboration with employees to kind of hang out, have lunch. But each kind of portion of it would be department specific as well with their own dedicated conference rooms. But it would give a lot of meeting space that the district actually desperately needs because there is a very lack of that space within the district, especially in our current
Yeah, you'd
central
have
office.
one real large conference room for a couple hundred people, two that would be similar to this size, and then the boardroom that the only thing built into the boardroom would be the dais. The seating would be flexible seating, so you could have trainings, tables, and things in there as well.
I don't know, Dr. Huckrider, do you want to explain any more about some of the trickle-down movement or domino effect, I guess, of using, if we move things out of this building, what would this be used for?
Yeah, so we would finish construction December of '27 or January of '28. So central office would make that move to the new building. Head Start, Kids Club, and Child Nutrition would stay housed here. They would relocate. And so I believe Kids Club would utilize the facility back here in the back where our offices are. Head Start would be where Special Services is. They would have this shared room for all the functions that they do and all the meetings that they have. There would only be two folks handling this. Child Nutrition would stay up where they are. The entire front area would be renovated starting in January of '28, would be completed August of '28 in time to move DAEP from College View over here to this front center. So you'd have a secure vestibule, you would have secondary classrooms, a couple elementary classrooms, restroom renovations, and so that whole front end would be renovated in about 8 months in time for the beginning of the 28-29 school year.
That would give us a lot more opportunities at College View by pulling DAEP outright to maybe expand some of the programs there, or
Opens up a lot of space, and it gives us about a year and a half to start planning potentially of what we would utilize those spaces for, actually a couple years in the 28-29 school year.
And I'll just add too, I'll just say, it's kind of, I think it would be beneficial for College View in other ways as well, that it's still, I think it's been a perception issue for the campus, that it's had both all the great things that are going on at College View, but also the DAP is there. So being able to pull that off, I believe would be probably a positive.
I think there's definitely a stigma there that sticks with some folks that I think removing it, putting it here, and adding some additional programming over there would be beneficial. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Well, and if we're talking about benefits, I think it's great to remember that in '23, we had this really comprehensive bond package where we were trying to take care of, a wide variety of needs in our district. And this is kind of that last piece that was part of that bond. And one of the things that was talked about back then was just the need for space for our employees that are in this building and how they're working really crammed together and not ideal situations. And so it's a benefit to be able to take care of the many employees that work in this building too.
And we've seen a draft floor plan of the new building as well as up front of what would take place at this building. That's something, we took our first glimpse, making a couple changes to that we'd bring back to the board here in the next month or so. And also, the new building would be built if the district ever needed to expand that particular facility. You'd have the ability to expand on that site if you needed to. Just looking at this particular site, you see Sylvester Road. You'll see a roadway that's going right through the middle there. That is a thoroughfare that the city has had planned there for years, that we're in discussions with them. We feel like the infrastructure that's in place now, that thoroughfare really doesn't fit the bill anymore, especially with the work that's going to be taking place on 6. So we're having some discussions with them. We want them to reconsider that thoroughfare plan that was approved, I believe, back in 2007. And that obviously it's 18 years ago, a lot of things have changed. So we're hoping that that roadway, we would have to expense that would not have to be put in.
Yeah,
It would not be immediate,
This one.
but we
You're
would have
talking
to
that,
have
yeah, that low curve thing.
This one
Yes.
right here, yes. It is in the thoroughfare plan. It is supposed to connect down. It's not on the map, but down over here as it gets closer to Rock Prairie. The original intention was to take people, if they're over in this general area, they could take this road back to Rock Prairie instead of having to go north on Highway 6, U-turn. But instead, how they have it now in their thoroughfare plan, it really just takes you north of Rock Prairie, so it dumps you back on the service road and still takes you north on Highway 6 to make the U-turn. So there's really no reason so much for it anymore, especially with the development they've had over there. So that's what we're in consultation with them of what it's going to take and what that process is going to be to have that thoroughfare plan updated to remove this from going through this portion of the land, because it also requires this portion right here, which is another owner, for whenever that gets developed to complete it. So it really is a kind of a road to nowhere until that gets developed as well. Whereas these car dealerships right here, this road already kind of exists and suffices for what they are wanting. So
I actually didn't know that that was a planned thoroughfare. I still can't
It is.
figure out where would it go from that curve on the plan? Where was it supposed to go to Rock
goodness,
Prairie?
it's
That's a ways.
I believe it's near that church.
Yes.
That's right
Okay.
there right past McAllister's.
So basically, it
goes right
takes
there.
you back south to 6 to go back north, or you could just go Sebastopol Road to get
Yeah.
on 6. So it
There's
really
really no
doesn't serve a
benefit.
purpose. I think probably back in '07 with less infrastructure, okay. But now with the infrastructure changing and 6 changing, you're just taking people further south to come back right where they were to begin with. So there's a whole process that we're starting now to go through. Ultimately, I believe the decision resides with the city council once you go through the different steps. And so we'll be having discussions with them and working through.
I will say, well, dude, one good thing is I could probably walk to this. I live over here, so I go on that road all the time. And there is a lot of traffic on that access road right now. So getting on and off of that access road is not ideal. So when you're having, I mean, it is a good location because it's off of 6 and it's, it's pretty central. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying turning that access road is so busy now, and maybe with all the expansion and changes on 6.
I think
that'll
the
be
changes with
better.
6 would help that
Will
quite a
be
bit.
better.
And that's
But
why this is a good site for a central office versus a campus where school kids with parents, buses, everything else trying to navigate that access road, where with central office employees, it gives a little bit of a different clientele that's using those roadways right there versus the students.
It also gives you the ability to develop future district projects on this particular site. And then you've also got, you have parking spaces that you could share for nightly events. I know Fine Arts Center was on the agenda for discussion for the 23 bond. Didn't quite make the final cut. I think the flip side of that is just, I'm not saying this is something we're going to talk about anytime soon, but I believe that facility had a lot of office spaces in there as well. With the central office there, that project can be condensed down because you wouldn't need the office spaces because you would have a new central office. So it would be really more of a fine arts center and be very specific to that, or whatever future projects. You've got multiple acres there to develop site.
And we can't put a school on this. It's not big enough for school, ideally, correct?
I mean, size-wise, you could put an elementary school, but the access and everything else is very difficult, especially with how it is shaped right there and everything, and getting parents in and not having a situation like we have had at Rock Prairie prior to this renovation project of you would have parents probably lined up down Sebesta and onto the feeder road. Which
So not
then
ideal at all.
It's not ideal. I wouldn't think this would be an ideal location for a elementary at this time or in the near future.
Do you know what's going in on the space that the owner has?
No,
We don't have it.
it's, we've looked it up and they've told us in some of the meetings, the owners, but I don't remember the family name who owns it or what if their plans are to sell it or keep it or what. Don't know.
Well, that back corner used to be where the Amazon site was, so I don't know what's gonna.
Which back corner? The one right beside the 8.67 acres?
Yes, I think so, yes. I think
Okay.
so.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with what was there. Right, right. I know a church is in that upper left corner. Yeah, but this is just for the procurement method. It's for us to go construction manager at risk versus competitive seal proposal. And it just gives competitive seal proposal has its benefits. New construction and renovations with kind of how really since 2020 when COVID happened and then Storm Uri, construction manager at risk is really a more beneficial procurement method for these types. So you know where you are going into budget. I know I had a project in the past, and if we would have, I was told after we bid it out, if we would have waited 2 months, it would have been 2 million over budget. So it's versus 100 grand under budget. So it's a quick kind of process in some of this, and with competitive seal proposal, you get updates from your architect, but it's nice having that contractor right beside you through the whole entire process to give you real world numbers, and that they're talking to their subs, they're getting numbers to know exactly where we stand instead of, hey, we're seeing this on other projects here and there, and then you get to bid day and it's way out of budget. Then you've got to really pivot on what you want to do. That's why I think Seymour is a better method for this project right now.
So I'd like to make a motion that we go with the construction manager at risk procurement method for this project.
A second.
One quick question that's not necessarily related to the motion, but this would still leave the district with how many tracts of land that,
I know of one other.
We've got the 100
by
off of
Indian
Arrington,
Lakes.
and then we have the 90, which has the CTE off South Dowling.
yeah, just those two? Okay.
Yeah.
So large enough that if we do need to, at some point, add another campus, any of them would be available. So, okay, just check.
Motion by Ms. Simmons, second by Ms. Ege. Remember, we need to raise our hands. That's the new law. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Buckner. Brings item 3, 26-27 budget workshop.
Good evening, Mr. Horick, Dr. Harkrider. Thank you guys for taking the time to start the budget process. And so this is really just one of the first workshops that we're going to kind of go through, but we're going to hit on a few things tonight. We're going to start with historical financial information. We're going to look at the current budget, and then we're kind of going to look at a bunch of numbers, if you hadn't guessed that already. And then we're going to look at the next steps. But we really want to take this time to kind of start the conversation with you guys to figure out what the board priorities will be for the 26-27 fiscal year. When we finish the presentation, there'll be a thought exchange here. It's not just for our board members, but we would like to hear from our community. Anybody in the crowd watching online, that QR code is available for your feedback, and we would love to hear from you. So just looking at historical information, I think it's important to pull this into a 12-month analysis. So when you see the financial tonight, you're going to see it on a 10-month close. And so if we kind of roll the numbers forward, and these are the numbers that have to go to TEA. So this is what went to TEA, or will be going to TEA. And we did have an increase of $2.5 million that was added to the fund balance with a 10-month close, which is really exciting. So when you look at that, and you've really got the lowest you want to be on your fund balance per operating cost is a 3-month, and that got us a little bit above that. And so I think that's as low as we want to go. We don't want to go any further than that. When you look at a 10-month close, we're going to add $14 million to the fund balance, okay? And that's going to be the total fund balance. But I want you all to keep that in mind. That is not real dollars in a sense of cash in the bank. So it looks good, but we've got to keep that in mind. But the positive is we did add to the fund balance this year. So that's a big positive. You can kind of look at what the trends are doing. For example, the revenue we collected in 23-24 versus the revenue we collected in 24-25 is pretty eye-opening. We collected $4 million less revenue over those 2 years on a 12-month basis. That's because of lost enrollment. That's because of loss of SHARS funding. There's a lot of things that play into a factor there. Even if you look at the interest earnings, we're seeing a decrease there. When you look at our current budget, you're going to see where we're a little off on that as well on our interest earnings. So we have to kind of monitor that. You can look at payroll cost, and you can look at across the board. We were up in payroll cost, but our district did a great job of looking at those other expenditures outside of the classroom, outside of, other things with payroll cost, and cut other programs in the 24-25 school year. So
Can I ask on the payroll cost, though? That, I'm assuming, shows the money that was earmarked directly for teacher salaries, right? It was kind of that in and then an out, right?
Well, this right here is going to look
Or is that in there, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, so it'll be on the next one. So this is our historical. So these are the last 2 years. And then when I show it right here, then this is going to account for that money. Yes, ma'am. So you'll see I'm going to take it back one time. So you'll see just the revenue here, and this is actual cost. So the actual revenue was $150 million. When I flip over, wrong way. When I flip this way, we budgeted $155 million budgeted. Okay, so we'll kind of monitor that, but there's just a difference to kind of put that in perspective of a lot of the revenue we receive for the salaries for our teachers and other things from the state. I want to show this to you. So if you look at our budget calendar when we get through, we're going to meet often and just kind of walk you guys through the budget process. When we do meet and talk about a budget, don't get so excited, Mr. Horak. When we do meet and walk you through these budget process, we're going to kind of bring you back just where we are currently and walk it through. This is how I've always liked to look at it, as percentages of collection, and then also when you look at your expenditures, your percentage of collection as well. So we're a wealthy district, and so we're going to see a lot of that state funding up front, so you can kind of see real close that available school funding, foundation state funding, 94.29% collected as of right now. That's because we're in a payment class 3, so we're going to get a majority of that money up front, and then our last payments after our tax revenue. Our district collects its taxes. You can pay it in February or November or June, or you can pay it all in January. And so that's a little bit different than I'm used to, but that's something that we do here at the City of College Station. So those are things that you're going to see reflected through the year. Please pay attention to federal revenue. I don't feel like we're going to collect all of those funds, and I do not feel like we're going to be a little bit slow on the interest income as well. So we're going to have to monitor those pots of money, as well as our enrollment is down. And so I'm going to bring that to you as we go through the year. I budgeted ADA of 13,203, and we're already below that number. That's not good for this time of the year, but we're down 300 students in enrollment. And so that's something that we're going to have to consider and monitor. So I know this is a lot of numbers, but I want to walk you through this because this is a great way to be transparent, but it's also a great way for a board member to really stay on top of what's going on in the school district. So if you start with the far left column, you're going to look at the budget, and that's what you guys adopted. At the top, it's by function. At the bottom, it's by object, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But when you look at function, the positive here is if you look at those top three categories, that's money in a classroom. And a district always wants to be at least 60% money in a classroom, and we are. And so that's a big positive. And then you can kind of look at the other items and what percentages we spend. But then if you look at expenditures per period, and then you can see some big numbers, like if you go down to that function 51 and you see maintenance and operations, $3.4 million. That's because we paid our insurance costs this month, and that's over $2 million. And so that's something that when you look further down at the bottom, you're going to see that I'm 53% expended in operating costs. That's because of insurance is being paid. And that's a huge number, like one of our biggest numbers in our entire budget outside of payroll. Then you kind of go over, you can look at year-to-date expenditures, and that's the 50 million that's expended to date, and then percentage of budget expended. So that's what you want to kind of monitor. For example, right now, this is of October, so 33.33% of our budget could be expensed by this time, so you can kind of look at those functions and kind of monitor it that way. When I say 33.3%, the big number you want to watch is the one on the bottom. So that's by object code and payroll cost. So if you think about most of our payroll costs are salaried or split out over 12 months, 24 payments. And so you want that number to be 33.3 or less. If it goes above, we're going to have a problem. We bust the budget because we're over 84% of our budget is in payroll. Okay, so those are big numbers. So you can kind of monitor that, and then at the last column, you can kind of see the percent left to be expended. So we'll bring this back to the board every time we have a budget workshop as we go through the year, and that's just another way that you can kind of monitor us and make sure that we're staying on top of the budget. Okay, so when we talk about balancing the numbers, I just want to look at several things. I want to talk about enrollment trends. I want just to give you a quick update on federal funding, our local funding challenges. I want to talk about the previous budget cost management that the board brought to us last year when we were we were talking about what we did last year during the budget. I've got also what the board said was our priorities in the previous budget cycle. The risk is really, I want to show you what fund balance looks like, of course, and then talk about what those board priorities will be for the next budget cycle, okay? So this is really just kind of our purpose, that we want to bring this back because we always want to keep the goals in mind for our students, our staff, and our community. And so that's really kind of just the purpose of this, and it's our priority through our budget process. This is the enrollment trends right now. So this is by grade level. One thing that's kind of eye-opening that you need to kind of monitor is just look at our earlier grade numbers compared to our older grade numbers. For example, I've got 909 kinder, but I've got 1,033 12th graders, 1,107 11th graders. So as those grades graduate, if we can't grow those earlier grades, that's just going to be heavier losses as we move forward. This is how it looked per campus. And so you can kind of look at that far right column, and that's enrollment growth versus our 2024 snapshot. So you can see like one of our highest growth campuses was South Knoll Elementary, one of our highest loss campuses with Rock Prairie Elementary. We lost 12.3% of enrollment on those campuses. And then you can kind of just see per campus what it looked like on enrollment. I also paired those total capacities of those buildings so that you can kind of see that. The positive with construction that Josh and his team are doing right now is going to grow those two high schools and take care of that capacity issue there that you see on the screen. Here's another thing I kind of like to look at. So when you look at early ed, pre-K, and kinder, those are numbers based on our previous early ed, pre-K, and kinder. When you look at first, second, third, and fourth, what I'm doing is walking that kindergartner to first grade. Did I have an increase at that campus or did I have a decrease? Does that explanatory for everybody? I kind of put in the reddish color, that's where we had decreases on campus, and then your navy colors where we had consistent increases. And so some of the things that we weren't really expecting is Forest Ridge. There's not huge growth there. It's really at Pebble Creek, but you can kind of see the adjustments in the enrollment there and the growth of those students. Greens Prairie is another one that's growing pretty steady, and we'll take that into consideration as we go. But South Knoll Elementary, that was kind of a shocker too. They grew in every single grade level. So that's just our elementary campuses. And what I did here, I know this is a lot of information, but I can get this PowerPoint out if you don't already have it, so you can look at grade spans. And so what it is it's your elementary grade span over the years. It starts with 1920, and you look at each grade span, and you can kind of see how we're decreasing and increasing the different pieces of that. We're pretty steady on our elementary schools. We kind of grew, and we're kind of decreasing a little bit, but you can kind of just see how those numbers lay out. But I mean, like, look at intermediate last year, 2,064, we're 2,082. We had some strong growth in intermediate this year. Also, you know, that one thing I know we had some, usually in a high school, what I've always seen is a little bit of a kind of kids graduating early and things like that. But we had over 100 kids show up, freshman kids, new to our district compared to our 8th grade kids. And so that's something to kind of monitor. And then this is going to get a little busy, so just hang with me. This is just enrollment trends. And what I try to look at is when we're looking at enrollment trends, you're trying to find something that makes sense so that you can build good enrollment numbers going forward. And it's really kind of hard. You know, it doesn't have, one year we might be up in kinder, the next year we're down in kinder. One kinder walks to first, the next year it doesn't. And this follows the same path. The pre-K through pre-K and kinder are just based on the previous year, but when you do first, second, and third, you're walking those grade levels from first to second, from second to third, and you can kind of see where there's growth some years and there's decline some years. But I have provided this big, massive spreadsheet in a transmittal before. I know it's a lot of information. This kind of breaks it out a little bit different. When we talk about federal funding, I know that's a little bit of a scare for a lot of people. I kind of laid it out in 3 different proposals. The president's proposal is really not something they're looking at right now. He wanted to do a lot of block funding, meaning we're just scoop all the federal funds together and then say you can spend it on multiple things. We're really not talking about that right now. What they're really trying to debate is between the House and the Senate's plans, okay? So if you look at those 2 columns, you can kind of see some eliminations. For example, Title II, the House says eliminate Title II, and the Senate wants to level fund those grants, okay? So they have until January. So what happens with federal funds is they're front-loaded in a sense. They're funded. So when they build their 26 budget, it actually funds our 26-27 school year. So they're in the process of building their 26 budget that we went into close the government, and we've now just opened up. We're hoping by January 1, we're going to have those numbers and know what happens with our federal funds. The least restrictive, and we hate to say this, but a lot of our advocates are really kind of just pushing at least to level fund us. At the least, you know, so they call that CR funding, but it just really kind of does a level funding. But they're in the process of negotiating these. If you look at the far column, you can kind of see what the effects would that be for our school district, and you can see our numbers are on what we're currently at those grants. So when we talk about local funding challenges, this is a lot of what we're looking at. The biggest really that's going to hit us the hardest is that decline in enrollment. If we get hit with federal funding, that's just going to be another layer that's going to hurt. But reduction or elimination of federal funding. Stagnant funding is another big one. It's stagnant funding or funding with strings. And so we did get some additional funding this previous legislative session, but it was strings attached. Even our additional money that we got for the basic allotment that brought it up to $6,215, the strings that basically were attached to that, meaning they gave us a raise for salaries, but they didn't even cover the TRS. And so the additional money we got there would cover just the TRS portion of that. And so it wasn't really new money. They gave us some money based on enrollment. and that money has strings attached to it as well. So they're still working at TEA to prove, we have to kind of send in information to them to prove how we spend that money. But it's really just to prove that we spend it on insurance and other operating costs. So it increases in insurance that we've seen since the 2019 increases. They're talking like some of that can be utilized for that purpose, but we have to prove it. So there's just still a lot of strings attached to the money that we're getting. Labor shortages and wage pressures are huge as well. So we have some shortages in our transportation department. We have some shortages in our food service that are pretty detrimental to our district. But we kind of have to weigh, the cost of that increase in the wages to be able to get those additional positions when there's so many people fighting for those type positions. And so you really kind of see some wage pressure there. Of course, we're still dealing with inflations, and to add to inflation, you're dealing with tariffs. Health insurance, I'll bring that to you every time. We pay between $470 up to $510 per month for our employees. We're required by law to pay $225, so we're doing a great thing there. However, we feel like we could do a better job of the insurance that we're providing to our employees. So we're really going to take a hard look at that and see if we can bid that out and provide them a better insurance program with the same dollars. We feel like we are ahead of what other people are doing. We just got to match the product. Vouchers, we're unknown about vouchers. We don't know how vouchers are going to affect us, and that didn't even take the decline in enrollment. Of course, I've mentioned 84% of our budget is in payroll cost. We're outspending our allocations by large sums in special education and early education, and so those are things we might want to look at. And then there is a push for increased transparency and scrutiny on all districts, not just our district, but just on all districts. And so those are things we want to look at and some of the challenges that we're ready to face on. So to kind of bring back, I went and listened to the presentation last year of the board and the board priorities, and this is a lot of what was talked about. There was a lot of talk on not digging into fund balance anymore. In fact, strengthening it closer to 5 to 6 months. And so not only don't dig into fund balance, but go ahead and make sure that we're increasing our fund balance. Prioritizing academic quality, so maintaining those class sizes, and we talked a lot about that. There was some discussion on making informed decisions, knowing that we have to make hard decisions, but as a team, we're willing to do that. And that was something that was discussed in length. Review out-of-district transfers. And so that was discussed as a possible revenue stream to look at out-of-district transfers and bring those in. And that was mentioned last year at going through the budget process as well. Another thing was just improve attendance incentive. Improve attendance, and we looked at attendance incentives. We've adopted attendance incentives, but we're going even further. So we're doing thought exchange this year, and then really kind of just honing on how and why kids are being absent, and making sure that we're getting information out to parents and listening and trying to change our conversations that we're having to make sure we get kids in classrooms. Expand learning options, just to consider online and alternative school models as part of our long-term planning. That was brought up last year as well. Another thing that was brought up was to evaluate programs. Not only hit the classroom, to make sure that if we're cutting in the classroom, that we're cutting in extracurricular, we're cutting in fine arts, and we're cutting in the other programs as well. And that was brought up last year. So as we took all of that into play, this is kind of what we did to cut cost in the previous year. We evaluated secondary class schedules, just looked at reducing conference schedules when we had more than, if a teacher had 2 conference periods, we kind of evaluated those to make sure that they were appropriate and that we could maintain instructional quality. We've reviewed intermediate and elementary class sizes, but when I say that, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. What we did was maintained a 22-to-1 structure. We did not increase class sizes in a sense. We just, with the decrease in enrollment, we were being fiscally responsible by decreasing those staff. But we did look at all of that, and then we made sure that it was decreased. We reviewed facility rental fees, make sure that we were charging, make sure they were in market. We reestablished a consistent campus staffing model and made sure we were equitable between all campuses. We adjusted the campus budget allocations and looked at all pots of money and making sure we were pushing as much of that as we possibly could could to the campuses. We had developed an attendance incentive, like I touched earlier. We established co-curricular pupil allocations, and so that we allocated per pupil in a lot of those programs where we could monitor if a band is increasing, they're going to get more money. If a band is decreasing, they're going to get less funding. But we kind of made sure that that was fair across the board. We compared all of these things to peer districts just to see where we lined out and where we could look at cuts and where we could look at some savings. We implemented zero-based budgeting for departments, and everybody kind of came and helped us kind of develop these things. So this is really what we did for 25, 26. When you talk about risk, you can look at that huge increase that you see there in fund balance. That's the 14 million from closing a 10-month budget, but that's just kind of looking at each one of those different funding streams. Non-spendable and assigned budget is basically money that we can't spend. We don't even have an option to spend that. Typically, that's your inventory in your warehouse. We've already spent it, but we haven't pushed the cost out to the campus. So it's sitting on a balance sheet account. So it kind of has to be set aside as non-spendable or assigned. Or if we got money for a grant or something like that, that money has to be spent on that purpose, and so it would be non-spendable. Committed is when we go to the board and we say, hey, we want to commit this money for future projects, for roofing project, for construction projects and other things. We commit that fund balance, and it's committed by the board. Unassigned fund balance is fund balance that we use for our operating day-to-day operations. And so when you look at your fund balance, you really want to look at that unassigned number and see where it is. So our new fund balance would be the 58,181. However, if we were closing a 12-month budget, total new fund balance would be $46,461,102. If you want to look at that unassigned and kind of compare that to our current budget, it actually, 3 months of operating with our current number is $39,542, and unassigned would have been $41,057,000. So we came just a tad bit under there to hit that 3-month mark on a 12-month spend. And then if you look at 5 months, and I know when we talked about what the board said last year, they said they want that closer to a 5 or a 6. That's a huge number, and that's a lot.
Can you
And so-
remind me of that discussion? I don't remember. What was our rationale for 5 or 6? I mean, what did it have to do with just the changing of the fiscal year?
No, ma'am. It was just a mentioned, and I think it was you or Joshua mentioned that we need to make sure that we're being financially sound, and then we need to look more to that 5 or 6 mark. And truly, that's where districts need to be at the 5 to 6 month budget, but no less than a 3-month in fund balance.
6 months seems mean a lot to have, and I've never had a 50% of. I mean, I go back a little. I mean, who knows what I said, but a 6 month seems a really big fund balance to have half of your annual budget.
It's a
in
good
reserve.
safety net. And so the hard thing about that is, like the district I came from, we were at 6 months. But you have to do that over time. It's something you can't do, and you can't do it in the area that we are in now. You can't do it with a legislation not supporting a school district, and that's what we have going on.
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22, because with the legislature we have now, it's more important to have a bigger, larger
Yes.
fund balance, but it's
If
more
we would have
difficult.
set it
so.
up earlier, we would be in different talking right now.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I could see us having the discussion that we don't know what's going to happen with the legislature and with vouchers and all. So yes, we want to make sure we have a comfortable fund balance, but on the other hand, we are in a tight budget situation, so there's not a lot of, in my mind, a lot of extra money to start to just be, putting away. So finding that sweet spot in there is the real.
It's
I
just
guess, the
try
real
to get it
question.
where you're not taking any more out of it, so you're not getting below that 3-month threshold. And the reason why I say a 3-month is because there's so much that goes into fund balance, because it's really kind of, we don't want to ever have to borrow money to make a payroll before we can get a tax payment. Our federal funds, you saw the numbers earlier with Head Start, with Title I, with Title II, those funds we spend them, and then we have to request that money back from the state. Honestly, TEA gives us our state payments when we request it on a monthly basis. And so we fund that stuff up front. So we kind of have to have that cash in the bank. And so when you look at even the first rating, if you kind of follow what they're doing on the first rating, they don't just monitor your fund balance, but they monitor the cash in your bank to make sure you've got enough cash in your bank to make 90 days worth to make your payments. And so that's just one thing we're graded on. But that's good sound. 3 months is good sound, no less than 3 months. But hefty, good place would be 5 to 6. And it was mentioned last year, so I just put that on there. Okay, so we kind of get to our budget, our board priorities. And so I'm just going to kind of start out. I'm going to leave this up to you guys to kind of talk between yourself. I know Dr. Harkrider might have some additional things. These are just some of the things that I put up there for just thinking, like fund balance uses, compensation expectations, staffing ratios, balancing programs, looking at those, class size, or maybe establishing additional revenue sources, like taking the transfers, looking at possibly doing online courses and things like that, just to generate the revenue streams into the district to kind of help us push what we're doing here a little bit further.
We're going to put together a budget committee. I believe we've had one before that will include a couple board members, some administrators, as well as community members, parents. So these priorities are really big from a standpoint of giving that committee some guidelines and parameters as we talk of exactly what the board wants, as well as what a couple new board members, as they come on, their input as well with the thought exchange. And this won't be the first time we're talking about this. But we need some guiding steps, because I believe our first meeting is December 9th. A couple weeks. Yeah. So it's open for whoever would like to talk.
What do you feel like are the appropriate uses for fund balance in your previous district? Like, you're the expert here on that.
One-time expenditures. And so when you look at fund balance and you're wanting to dip into fund balance, it might be that additional bus that you need to purchase. It might be that you've saved some fund balance and you want to build something, do something to a building, update the buildings. There's a lot of play that goes into our budget here in College Station that we have to keep in mind is we don't do the upkeep of our buildings right now in our general fund budget. We don't do technology replacements for the most part. We don't do infrastructure on technology. We do not do roof replacements out of our general fund. That's all in our INS, in our construction budgets. So our community does support us. What's really going to hurt if our community declines a bond in the future, that's where we're taking those items, and that will need to be shifted back to the general fund. So our bus replacement cycles and things like that, that is all in our bond program. But typically, if you're going to dig into fund balance, it needs to be on a one-time expenditure.
We'll tell you, just based on trimming department budgets, trimming campus budgets, we're about as lean as we can get from that standpoint without compromising programs. So that's really not, there's not too much more we can dig in from that capacity. So I think if you look at the kinder first and second enrollment trends that she showed you earlier, it's about 100 kids less than we have third through 12th grade. In 10 years, that doesn't change, you're down 1,000 students. So I think it's imperative that we have got to figure out another revenue source. Out of district transfers is something we've talked about now for over a year. That is the only option that we have to increase revenue. And if that's not a direction we go, that's fine. However, programs are going to be compromised. And you're going to have to start looking at, do we consolidate campuses? It's happening across the state. So either we can be proactive and have another revenue source come in, or there's going to have to be some really tough decisions that the community is not going to like, and we're not going to have a choice, because we're going to get to a point where you're going to have to consolidate one or more campuses, and you're not going to have a choice otherwise because you're going to have to cut savings if you're not bringing in additional revenue.
And I think we've been incredibly fortunate to not do that yet as we get into the audit committee later and how lean we've gotten and how well you guys have done to save money. The concern is where else can you go? I mean, these are all, you hit it on the head with what you see here. The unknown is what's going to happen with enrollment, with vouchers, where we're headed, decreased. We've had demographers in here for years telling us the growth was astronomical, and then a whole bunch of factors come into play with that. So predicting the future makes it exceptionally challenging where we're headed. But I think you're looking at compensation, of course, staffing ratios, all of that is exactly the concern, class size. And then the alternative is we haven't had to close any campuses yet, and we've been very lucky because other districts have.
I think we have an attractive, product to sell in CSISD. And so I think out-of-district transfers is, to me, one of the most logical options that we need to explore.
I was just going to say that because we're in year 2 of this legislative session, we know we're not going to get increases in funding. So, just putting that out there for anybody who might not be aware of that. So we're going to have to be careful this year, I think. I mean, and we trust you to look at those numbers and help us understand that too. But I think it's hard, but we're going to have to be careful, really careful this year.
Can you pull up slide 11?
Okay, you'll have to help me.
It's numbers at the campuses. Enrollment trends. Yep. I think this is important to look at, especially for everybody at home and in the audience. This one. This one. Just kind of seeing the numbers, and we're talking about this out-of-district transfers. There are campuses that need students, right? Like, the numbers are right here for us. Is this accurate? So I'm thinking, like, it does seem beneficial for us to look at some of these campuses and figure out how we can work these students so that we don't get so far behind with the budget. But this slide seems really important to just kind of see those elementaries and then see the ones that are kind of bursting a little bit and then hoping that that tapers. And that's kind of what the demographer has said, that we're not super growth, we're kind of just stalling a little bit.
I think that's the big piece, is that we've talked about this out-of-district transfer stuff for so long. And just to clarify for everybody, this isn't a free-for-all where you get accepted into College Station ISD and you get to pick where you're going. That's not how this is going to go. And I think that's maybe the part that people are missing, is that, yes, we have some overcrowding at certain schools. Well, y'all are smart enough to know that we're not going to put kids in those schools because obviously what Kristen just said, we can prove where we need to put kids. So it's a strategic plan of planting where we need to have children depending on what grade they need to be in. So, again, if anybody has any other solutions for revenue growth besides going to A&M and asking them for a grant or something that can be used for anything,
They're going to say no.
they're going to say no. But, I mean, those are some things that, as I've learned in 6 years at school of finance, hands are kind of tied. Legislators tell us what we can and can't do. Not a lot of local control.
Yeah, the state's created a market for competition amongst public schools. And so either we're to the party early or we're to the party late, because districts have been doing this. When I worked in Grand Prairie ISD 18 years ago, our superintendent at the time created schools within a school and started taking out-of-district transfers 18 years ago. And that was the only reason that district did not go under back then, because we took in 5,000 out-of-district transfers from all over Dallas-Fort Worth that wanted to be a part of it. And I understand it's something different, it's scary, but when you look at revenue and going back to just kind of priorities, we need some feedback. Is the expectation that we give staff raises? That's the first thing on my list every time before we start a budget conversation is staff raises. Where can we get? So if that's the case, which I'm assuming it would be, then obviously we've got to have additional revenue, because like I said, we've cut as much as we can cut that I feel comfortable that we haven't compromised programs. We've gotten leaner. Our staff's doing a good job of spending the funds that we do have. However, long-term planning wise, we've got to have some directions. Class size, as far as reductions, our class sizes right now, I believe we have one elementary classroom over 22 to 1, and we put a paraprofessional in that classroom to better support them. And so from that standpoint, we're good, but we do have some campuses that have extremely low ratios. So there's some FTEs that can be moved as you take in new students, potentially can be moved to other campuses, and it's not an additional burden to our budget. We will not compromise secondary classrooms. We're still at our threshold, I believe. Panay, were we at 25 or 27 with secondary staffing? Student to teacher, was it 25? Yes. Okay, 25 to 30, that expectation for us, we don't want to change. We don't want to move that to 27 to 32. So we want to make sure that we're continuing to deliver and not overstress our teachers. However, we also have to have some parameters and game plans of what the board would like us to see.
Well, I think I have a couple things, but one on the capacity, right? You've said, we just saw, we're down 300 students. I would think that we could absorb somewhere up to that level. Personally, and I've said this last month, I would like us to take this a little slowly because I think there are some unknowns, but we did have 300 more students last year. Now, we did have more teachers and staff last year too. So, I mean, I'm going to make sure I understand. Are we saying that you don't think we would be need to add additional staff back?
No, that's not what I said.
Okay, I just want to make sure, I didn't think
I said
so.
there are certain campuses that would not be part of taking on new kids, that their ratios are low and they could lose an FTE in a particular grade level. So that FTE would be moved to a different campus that had additional students coming in. So in the long term, would you have, it all depends on how many kids come in and then what our ratios looked at. We don't know that now. We had never done it, so it's complete unknown. Not going to have the answer today, not going to have it in January. We would have it at the end of February.
But I think the important thing to know is that obviously if we have more students, we would have more teachers to continue to meet those appropriate ratios. Is that fair? Or we would have. Of
course.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's said.
And that's why we're having this conversation now, so we can make a decision so that we can prepare, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Didn't give you
Getting back to, which we've got an item later we'll discuss on the out-of-district transfers. I think right now, to kind of wrap this up, we don't really have any guidelines about your priorities. And it's just you. It's not as an individual, throw something at us.
I would like to talk
We'll
about
take
the fund
notes.
balance a little bit more because I really think that seems maybe more than I expected. And I don't remember the exact numbers when we were doing last year's budget, but what were we estimating to add into the fund balance from going to that 10-month fiscal year? And then we
were higher.
We were estimating higher, or we've added more?
We added more.
Right, so.
Correct.
And kind of explaining, we were a good bit higher, right? And what happened there? And, I like being a conservative budget with our budget, but also if we should have been spending some of that money, I mean, I don't want to get too lean in our classrooms. That's where I'm
Well,
going.
okay, so we're still at 3 months. So we're right within $500,000 of where we need to be. Does that make sense? Because we put 3 months of our budget is $39,542,000. That's 3 months operating of our current budget. Our unassigned number at 12 months is $41,057,000. So we're where we need to be. Yeah, so no, we did exactly what we needed to do. We gave the raises that needed to be given, if you remember, and so we didn't compromise anything there.
Yeah, and when you're also anticipating a 10-month budget, I mean, there's a lot of guesstimates that go into that. And so there's a lot of unknown until it shakes out at the very end. There's no way to know exactly where it's going to fall. She had an expectation of where it ended up being higher, which was to our benefit, but it's still, we're where we need to be without dipping in and doing anything else.
That's perfect. So I just follow up saying then I would not really be in favor of trying to build up any more fund balance really, because I feel like we are very lean. So that's just, how could we get build up more fund balance if you're saying we're already lean. I think we'll make sure we're meeting our needs.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean,
So
if
just
we're
to-
able to grow our expenses in any area, it should be compensation. I mean, we can say that. We probably all agree. I know that that's difficult, but I mean, from a priority perspective, if we're able to increase anything, I think that's where it needs to be. But where does it come from is going to be the question.
So just to clarify, we're at about a 3.5-month fund balance.
Yes, sir.
And if we dip below a 3-month fund balance, we get hit hard when it comes to financial ratings, if we need to do bonds in the future, so forth and so on, right?
There's things you need to keep in mind, yes, sir. And as you grow your budget, then your operating 3 months grows as well.
Yeah, and just keep in mind, we're also, prior to losing roughly 300 students, we were at about a $2.1 million anticipated deficit budget as well. So now you're looking at close to $3.5 million deficit budget with no new revenue coming and programs and departments cut about as lean as we can get.
The programs are cut. The campuses are cut as lean as we can get. It's kind of hard because we had to reset that, but you've got to look at inflationary costs, tariffs, and things like that. I just don't think we can take the allocations any lower. We did a lot of that this year. It's been a hard transitional year for our departments and our students and our co-curricular and things. I don't think that's something we could touch at all.
We will
think
lose
those-
Title II funds. I had an alert today. White House announced multiple services within the Department of Ed are going to be franchised out to other departments. So I think you're just getting one step closer. I would anticipate a year from now, there is not a Department of Education. And so what does that look like?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's where my concern is, right, of where you're looking. It's hard to predict, but you see federal funding keeps being reduced, right? There's a trend that was already happening. Is that where you kind of see that continuing to go?
It
or-
wasn't happening. We lost our SHARS funding.
Okay.
And so they used to fund a little bit on inflation, and then that all depends on your student makeup, how you get that funding. However, right now, we're just hoping that we can get level funding. No increases for inflation or anything, but just level it, and then they'll reallocate it to our student makeup.
But, and to your point and what you're talking about, if you're following the national stage and what happened here with vouchers, if you look at where the money was coming from, it wasn't from Texas. It was coming into Abbott's coffers to attack public education. It was from out of state. It was national because they wanted a conservative state to pass vouchers. And as you said, Department of Education may go away, which may or may not be a bad thing. I don't know. But on a national scale, public education is under attack. And there's not a lot that we can do about that. So we're relying on the state and what we can do. You talk about the ratio sizes, class ratios. I would love to see secondary, lower than 25 to 30 when you consider about 50% of the kids have accommodations that are in those classrooms. It's a lot for teachers. At the same time, we don't know what we're heading into next year, and our enrollment is going down. And so you add vouchers on top of that, we don't know. And teachers are nervous and uncertain, and they don't want to see their classroom sizes grow. But we're also trying to keep everyone employed, and that makes it extremely challenging.
And I would just want to throw in here that obviously this is a major issue that's got to be dealt with, but College Station is not alone in this because we for so long were such a fast-growing district that we built schools that were needed and so forth. And now we just hit the absolute wrong time since basically post-COVID with decreasing or stagnant enrollments and so forth. And so it's not a good situation. But
After tonight, Josh, I'll expect a monthly text from you just to mention general fund balance while you're not here. So I look forward to receiving that from you.
I don't know if nobody's gonna like this, but I'm gonna mention it, but, because that's how I am. We just talked about a new building. When would we, I think we need to consider how much that would cost us in operating expenses, and when do we have to pull the trigger on that? Knowing that there are so many unknowns going forward with our number of kids coming, and we're talking about if we have to potentially close a building, and would it make more sense to repurpose? I think it's just something we need to make sure we are very cognizant of, because these next couple of years, there are a lot of unknowns, so
So you know that money has to be spent because
On-
it's already been sold as a bond.
we have not sold everything to bond, have
So
we?
you have to, the taxpayers voted on what we were using that money for.
I understand, but we don't have to spend it if something changes. Is that correct? If something changes with our needs, we can't spend on something else, really.
Correct.
But we can't, I know, and
So-
I certainly know it can't go to teachers, it can't go to all those things. I certainly understand
Huh.
that. But I just want to make sure it's not adding an extra, regular operating
Is,
expense to our,
it wouldn't add because the money has already been, in a sense, appropriated. We just hadn't sold the bond, right?
Correct.
I mean, for electricity, insurance, and all those kind of other things, just to run, and more,
So we're talking about maintenance and
yeah,
operations
just
of it?
operations, daily operations.
The daily operations wouldn't increase, your bills would increase, because, yeah, you're going to put another facility
Another
online.
facility, yeah.
Also want to clarify, I threw out the mentioning of closing in a campus as worst-case scenario. So that's not on the books, to make that crystal clear.
I understand your concern and what you're saying, but I also think there's opportunities we're not seeing with College View because of DAEP taking up a big portion of that there's possibly revenue streams there and growing enrollment there in various different programs. So it's an unknown, but yeah, the voters voted on this project and the money's there.
I guess my biggest thing, having a construction background before my current life, but it's not going to get any cheaper. And so just knowing what Mr. Simak, Mr. Buckner, and Ms. Wilson are having to deal with the changes that we approved 6, 7, 8 months ago of moving forward with stuff and then maybe change orders and things like that. It's the only project on the 23-24 bond that's not operational right now. So
Yeah, the budget could be blown waiting 6 months, potentially. I think the other diamond potentially in the rough, if, as we talk later, the board approves out-of-district transfers, the biggest growing market right now that I'm seeing across the state is online schools. And I think that is an opportunity for us to garner a lot of kids that we don't have to have space for. We've got room in College View to house teachers to be able to give that instruction. We've got plans to visit a couple of different campuses or a couple of districts across the state. That'd be something that we would consider opening for the 27-28 school year. But it is a growing market that I've seen no less than 10 school districts in the last 3 months announce plans to begin. And so it's obviously extremely competitive, but it's also a field of potential option for homeschool parents that when they get ninth, and I'm talking at the high school level, I'm not talking K-12, but I've got my kid K through 8. I'd like them to continue to be in homeschool, but it's becoming more challenging as a parent to be able to deliver that instruction. So you still get the homeschool setting, yet it's our teachers delivering the instruction and providing the resources. So I do think that is a market potentially for us to generate even more revenue, but we don't have to have a space for them because obviously they would be at home. So that's kind of a potential win-win for us on not overcrowding facilities, yet having enrollment grow as well.
I know we've talked about that particular topic before, but how does state funding work with the online?
My understanding is the same way as if they're here. Okay. Except, you wouldn't, depending on some districts, it depends on how it was structured. Some districts are only taking kids within their boundaries. Most I'm seeing are taking kids anywhere in the state of Texas. And you can be a student here. Now, the logistics, and that's why we want to go visit some campuses, because freshmen, sophomores, or actually now freshmen, potentially if they're passing, and juniors would have to take STAR tests. Well, you would have to take a STAR test with us, even though it's online. It couldn't be proctored, I don't believe, from your house. But there's just some hurdles we just want to look at to see how people have handled that in the past. And then bring you guys back more information once we've done some more research.
I guess I just want to acknowledge what you said about the fact that a new building is going to have some additional operating cost. I mean, that's a fact. I think a lot of things that we do have inherent risk in them, and we make decisions and we have to balance out those risks. And just having been a part of some of the bond committees well before I was on the board, and listening to the needs for that new building, it feels irresponsible in some ways not to move forward with those plans that were approved in that bond package, unless we were at a point that we're like, we cannot do it financially. So I acknowledge that there's risk in everything that we plan in our budget, but I feel like that is a calculated choice that will be good for a whole lot of people in our district.
I would agree, and we've been hanging on and patchworking this building for a long, long time, trying to make it work. And if you talk about just having other spaces, opportunities, things we can use, that would be a distinct advantage, I think.
And again, we talked about all the positives, and I do recognize a lot of positives to it, including it is what was on the bond committee. It's just hard to think about that when we just went through this discussion, and all those potential issues impacting our budget. That was a big page you had there, and I just think, it gives you pause gives me pause at least moving forward, at least consider challenges. That's your.
All right, so kind of the next steps, we're going to finalize some of the board budget goals next month. So if you think of anything and you want to reach out to Dr. Harkrider and give them your thoughts, we would be more than happy about that. We're going to continue to review campus and program non-payroll allocations, make sure that we don't need to tweak those, not down, but there's possibility we need to tweak a little up. We're going to examine new revenue sources, just like we've talked about tonight, establish staffing based on enrollment planning. We're going to continue to analyze costs. They've done a great job. Josh and his team have done a great job in transportation, just making sure that we're not paying overtime and taking that money and putting it towards things that really benefit the greater. Staffing ratios, we're going to continue to look at that. We're going to monitor the federal programs, and then we're going to develop a budget committee, a board budget committee that we can listen to our community and make sure that we're all on the same page with this. I do want to point this out. This is on the transmittal every month, but is our budget calendar, and it has a lot of good information on it if it will pull up. But it kind of lays out our whole process for the budget. We've got, if the transfers go through, you have the timelines on the transfers, you have the timelines on grandfathering. It kind of talks even about when we're going to do our staffing on for our campuses and guesstimates when we're going to require the budgets to be in from the campuses. And then it also talks about each board workshop that we're going to come back and discuss with you guys. And so that is on the transmittal, and we can make sure that you have that information for you guys. Here is what we were telling you earlier. We want to know what your priorities are. So if you want to look at that QR code, we want to hear from everybody, want to hear from our community, our board members, and then we want to make sure that we build this budget for the community, for our teachers, and for our students. Any questions?
Yeah, just a big thanks. I love seeing all the numbers that you have put together on our spending so far and all the categories. And also, I'm excited about having a budget committee where we can involve all our staff and campuses, but also the community helping us with these hard decisions. So I think it's a great step. So
Thank you for all your hard work
Thank
and everything
you.
you put into that.
Have a blessed.
Thank you.
That brings us to E, adjourn.